Hey everybody! Alright, so before we get started with this video, I just want to make a couple quick announcements. The first one is that the very first video of the Studio Ghibli series will be dropped on April 21st, which is 2 weeks from today. So you can keep an eye out for that. I'm still editing the videos, and as they're done, they'll be posted to Patreon first and then released one per week starting 2 weeks from now. A quick thank you to all of you who submitted questions for the Q&A video. That will be dropped next week, so if you still have any questions about music, composition, music theory, my process, anything like that, feel free to comment in this video or send it via email, which will be in the description of this video. And with that, I think we're ready to get started. Alright, so in this video, I'm going to break down each of the modes in a way that hopefully should help you begin using them right away. I'm going to address some of the most common questions that you can find on most online music forums. What are the modes and how do I find them? What emotional or contextual feelings does each mode have? How do I write a chord progression that stays in a particular mode? And how do I borrow chords or notes from a specific mode? We'll get started with a bit of basic theory, and then I'll write up a profile for each mode so that you can get started using them in your own music. Question number 1. What are the modes and how do I find them? In essence, the modes are just different types of scales. I'm sure you're familiar with the major and minor scale. The major scale is the stereotypical happy sounding scale, and the minor is often called sad or dark. These two scales or modes make up the vast majority of all Western music. If you're familiar with these two, then awesome. Pat yourself on the back because you already know 2 of the 7 modes that we'll be discussing. In addition to the happy-sounding Ionian and the sad-sounding Aeolian, there are also the sad but hopeful Dorian, the exotic-sounding Phrygian, the quirky and uplifting Lydian, the serious but optimistic Mixolydian, and the dark and pretty hard to use, actually, locrian. Now, one thing I'd like to say real quick is that all the descriptions I just gave are subjective. Is it possible to write sad-sounding music in the major key? Absolutely. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to go ahead and assign an emotional personality to each of these modes. These personalities come from how they're often described by musicians and those who use them. Just make sure that you're aware that it is indeed very possible to get different emotions in your music by how you use the different tools and concepts that you have available. So now that I'm off my soapbox, let's just get back to the topic at hand. What exactly are modes? Well, we've already defined them as scales, so the next natural step is to discuss how you can write each of these scales. We could go into detail on which intervals are used to write each mode, but that's needlessly complicated at this moment, although I will include this information in each mode's profile. Instead, let's take an arguably much simpler route and talk about how you can turn any major scale into the mode of your choice. Let's start by discussing relative scales. Just like you, each of the scales and modes have relatives. You share some of your DNA with your relatives, and each of the modes share their own DNA with their relatives. In this case, we'll consider the notes of a scale to be modal DNA. 2 relative scales share the same exact notes, just in a different order. For example, C major and A minor. C major has the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. An A natural minor scale has the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and A. These 2 scales are relatives to each other, and they share their DNA. The A minor has all the same notes as C major, but it starts on an A, which is the 6th note, also known as scale degree, in the C major scale. In fact, you can take any major scale at all and easily find its relative minor scale by looking at its 6th scale degree. For example, what's the 6th scale degree of D major? B natural. So what's the relative minor scale of D major? B minor. It's that simple. Likewise, every major scale, or Ionian mode, has a relative for each mode. Dorian starts on the second scale degree of a major scale. Phrygian starts on the third scale degree of a major scale. Lydian starts on a fourth scale degree of a major scale. Mixolydian starts on the fifth scale degree of a major scale. Aeolian, or the minor scale, starts on the sixth degree of a major scale, which we've already talked about. And Locrian starts on the seventh scale degree of a major scale. You can remember this order with the mnemonic, "I don't particularly like modes anyway, lady." And congratulations, you've now mastered the basics of modal theory. If you really wanted to, you could stop right here and start writing in any of these modes. However, in my opinion, the most fun to be had with modes is writing with more than one. And for that, it'll be important to understand our next topic, which is parallel scales. Parallel scales are any scale that share the same first note. So a C major scale and a C minor scale would be considered parallel. So would an A major and an A minor. This is because the tonic note, or the first note of a scale, is the home for each scale. It means that the chord progressions written in the parallel major and parallel minor scales want to resolve to the same home note. So how exactly is this useful? Well, let's look at the diatonic chords of the major and minor scales to find out. And diatonic, by the way, is just a fancy word for chords that occur naturally in a scale. If you didn't know already, you can find the diatonic chords of any scale by starting on the first note and following the pattern skip, add, skip, add. In other words, you start with the first note, skip the one right after it, add the third, skip the fourth, and add the fifth. You then continue this pattern for each note in the scale. Each chord is named after the first note used to make it, also called the root note. So for example, a C major scale goes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. Following this pattern, we find our first diatonic chord by starting with C, skipping the D, adding the E, skipping the F, and adding the G. This would create a C major chord, which contains C, E, and G. We then find our second chord by starting on a D, skipping the E and G, to create D, F, and G, which is a D minor chord. Make sense? Since this pattern is used for every single scale, and since every mode uses a specific pattern of intervals to become that mode, it means that every type of mode has its own specific order of diatonic chords. For example, all major scales follow the diatonic chord pattern of major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, and diminished 7. In this case, a capital Roman numeral is a major chord, a lowercase Roman numeral is a minor chord, and a little degree symbol after a minor chord means that it's a diminished chord. So a C major scale would have the chords C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and B diminished. And this pattern applies to all major scales. Likewise, all natural minor scales follow the pattern of minor first, diminished second, major third, minor fourth, minor fifth, major sixth, and major seventh. So why is this important? Well, let's say you're writing a chord progression in the major scale. You've played around for a bit and come up with the following progression: a major 1, a minor 3, and a major 4. You're working in a key of C major, so this comes out to be a C major, an E minor, and an F major. You like the feel of it so far, and you know that you want it to end with another minor chord. But you don't like the way that the minor second, minor third, or the minor sixth sound at the end of your progression. This would mean a D minor, E minor, or A minor. So what are you supposed to do? Just pick a chord that you don't think feels right? Nope, because here's where it all comes together. Since parallel scales share a tonic, you can borrow chords from any scale parallel to the one you're working in. So in this scenario, you're looking for a new minor chord. So you look at your parallel minor scale, the C minor scale. You decide to try the F minor from that scale, and you add it at the end of your progression, which is now major 1, minor 3, major 4, and minor 4. And you love it! The progression now feels exactly how you wanted it to feel, and all because you understood how to borrow chords from different scales. Following this premise, you can borrow chords from any of the parallel modes that you're working with. So at any given time, you have 6 parallel modes that you can borrow from. When looking at the parallel modes, your chord options look like this. In this chart, a flat symbol, which looks like a lowercase b, means that the root note of this chord is lowered a half step compared to what it would be in the parallel major scale. And a sharp sign means that the root is raised a half step compared to what would be found in the parallel major scale. So if you were working in the key of C major, your chord options would look like this. You'll notice that some of the chords are in bold type, and this is because these are the chords from each mode that you can borrow to give your chord progression a bit of the personality or the emotion that comes from that particular mode. So if you're writing in C Aeolian, or C minor, and you want to bring in some of the hopefulness that comes from the Dorian mode, you can borrow the major 4 from Dorian somewhere in your progression. And I'll go into more detail about why these specific chords were chosen as part of the modal profiles. So with that, let's get to know each mode a little bit better. The Ionian mode is the major scale. To create a major scale out of any note, start with your tonic and move up a whole step, another whole step, a half step, 3 more whole steps, and then 1 last half step. The emotional feel and personality of the major scale, or the Ionian mode, is a very happy and confident feeling. And the diatonic chords are a major 1st, minor 2nd, minor 3rd, major 4th, major 5th, minor 6th, and diminished 7th. The Dorian mode is a minor mode, meaning that its first chord is a minor chord. To create the Dorian mode from any note, simply pick your tonic and move up a whole step, a half step, 3 more whole steps, a half step, and 1 more whole step. The emotional personality of the Dorian mode is a little sad, like a minor scale, but more optimistic. The diatonic chords of the Dorian mode are a minor 1st, a minor 2nd, a major 3rd, a major 4th, a minor 5th, a diminished 6th, and a major 7th. Now, the only thing that keeps the Dorian from being a full-on minor scale is the raised 6th scale degree. This is the characteristic note that gives it the optimistic feeling that a minor scale is lacking. When writing a melody, it's useful to take advantage of this raised 6th to make sure that your melody sounds like it's written in the Dorian mode. Now, because the Dorian mode is so closely related to the minor scale, it's very easy for the listener's ear to mistake it for the Aeolian mode. To make sure that your chord progression sticks out as Dorian, try emphasizing the minor 1st chord and the major 4th chord. The minor 1st chord is the tonic, and it will help establish where your scale's home is. And the major 4th has the raised 6th as its 3rd, and takes full advantage of that hopeful feeling. To be extra careful, you can even try avoiding using the minor 5th chord, as this is the tonic to the relative minor, and can drag your sound back into the Aeolian mode if you use it too often. Next, we have the Phrygian mode, which is also a minor mode. Once again, that means that the 1st chord is a minor chord. To create a Phrygian mode out of any note, simply pick your tonic, move up a half step, 3 whole steps, a half step, and 2 more whole steps. The emotional personality of the Phrygian mode is very exotic. You can think of like Egyptian style music from film scores. The diatonic chords of the Phrygian mode are a minor 1, a major 2, a major 3, a minor 4, a diminished 5th, a major 6th, and a minor 7th. Now, the only thing that keeps the Phrygian mode from being a plain old minor scale is the lowered 2nd scale degree. This is the characteristic note that gives it the exotic feeling. When you're writing a melody, it's useful to take advantage of this lowered 2nd to make sure that your melody sounds like it's written in the Phrygian mode. Now, because the Phrygian mode is so closely related to the minor scale, it's easy for the listener's ear to mistake it for the Aeolian mode. So to make sure that your chord progression sticks out as Phrygian, emphasize the minor 1 chord, the major 2 chord, and the minor 7th chord. The minor 1 chord is the tonic, and it helps to establish where the home of your scale is. The major 2 chord has the lowered scale degree as its tonic, and the minor 7th chord has the lowered scale degree as its third. Both of these chords take full advantage of that exotic feeling and can be very useful in your harmonies. To be extra careful, you can even try avoiding using the minor 4 chord, as this is the tonic to the relative minor, and can drag your sound back into the Aeolian mode if you use it too often. Next, we have the Lydian mode, which is a major mode. This means that the first chord is a major chord. To create the Lydian mode from any note, simply pick your tonic, move up 3 whole steps, a half step, 2 more whole steps, and 1 more half step. The emotional feeling and personality of the Lydian mode is a very quirky, uplifting, almost whimsical sound, and it's very common in film music. The diatonic chords of the Lydian mode are a major 1st, major 2nd, minor 3rd, diminished 4th, major 5th, minor 6th, and minor 7th. The only thing that keeps the Lydian mode from being just a regular major scale is the raised 4th scale degree. This is the characteristic note that gives it the sense of whimsy and kind of quirky, uplifting feeling that it has. When you're writing a melody, it's useful to take full advantage of this raised 4th scale degree to help make sure that your melody sounds like it's written in the Lydian mode. Because the Lydian mode is so closely related to the major scale, it's easy for the listener's ear to mistake it for the Ionian mode. To make sure that your chord progression sticks out as Lydian, you can emphasize the major 1st chord and the major 2nd chord. The major 1 is the tonic, and it helps to establish the home of your scale. And the major 2nd has the raised 4th as its third, and takes full advantage of the quirky and uplifting feeling. To be extra careful, you could even try avoiding using the major 5th chord, as this is the tonic to the relative major and can drag your sound back into the Ionian mode if you use it too often. Next, we have the Mixolydian mode, which is another major mode. To create the Mixolydian out of any note, simply pick your tonic, move up 2 whole steps, a half step, 2 more whole steps, a half step, and 1 last whole step. The emotional personality of this mode is serious but optimistic. It's often used in Celtic music. The diatonic chords are the major 1st, minor 2nd, diminished 3rd, major 4th, minor 5th, minor 6th, and major 7th. Now, the only thing that keeps the Mixolydian from being just a plain old major scale is the lowered 7th scale degree. This is the characteristic note that gives it the serious but optimistic feeling. When you're writing a melody, it can be useful to take advantage of this lowered 7th to help make sure that your melody sounds like it's written in the Mixolydian mode. Because the Mixolydian mode is so closely related to the major scale, it's easy for the listener's ear to mistake it for the Ionian mode. To make sure that your chord progression sticks out as Mixolydian, you can emphasize the major 1st, the minor 5th, and the major 7th chord. The major 1st chord is the tonic, and it helps to establish the home of your scale. The major 5th has the lowered 7th scale degree as its third, and the major 7th has the lowered scale degree as its root. And these chords both take full advantage of the serious but optimistic feeling of this mode. To be extra careful, you can even try avoiding using the major 4th chord, as this is the tonic to the relative major and can drag your sound back into the Ionian mode if used too often. Next up, we have the Aeolian mode, and this is just a natural minor scale. The interval pattern for this is a whole step, half step, 2 whole steps, half step, and then 2 whole steps. This has an emotional personality of being sad and serious, and has a diatonic chord set of a minor first, diminished second, major third, minor fourth, minor fifth, major sixth, and major seventh. Finally, we have the locrian mode. This is another minor mode, and the interval pattern to create it from any note is a half step, 2 whole steps, a half step, and 3 whole steps. The emotional personality of the locrian mode is incredibly dark, and it has a diatonic chord progression of a diminished first, a major second, a minor third, a minor fourth, a major fifth, a major sixth, and a minor seventh. As a heads up, the locrian is very rarely used and incredibly difficult to work with because it has a diminished chord as its tonic. The only place that it's really known to be consistently used, and here I use the word consistently as a bit of an exaggeration, is in some subgenres of heavy metal. Now, the only thing that keeps the locrian from being just a regular minor scale is the lowered fifth scale degree. This is the characteristic note that gives it the dark feeling. When writing a melody, it's useful to take advantage of this lowered fifth to make sure that your melody sounds like it's written in the locrian mode. Because the locrian mode is so closely related to the minor scale, it's easy for the listener's ear to mistake it for the Ionian mode. To make sure that your chord progression sticks out as locrian, you can emphasize the diminished first chord, the minor third chord, and the major fifth chord. The diminished first chord is the tonic, and it will help establish where your scale's home is. The minor third has the lowered fifth as its third, and the major fifth has the lowered fifth as its root. So both chords take full advantage of the dark feeling associated with the locrian mode. To be extra careful, you can even try avoiding using the minor seventh chord, as this is the tonic to the relative major, and can drag your sound back into the Ionian mode if used too often. And with that, we've reached the end of another video. I hope that you found it helpful and that you feel more confident now in your ability to use the different modes and to borrow chords. If you'd like to be notified when the next video is released, please like and subscribe to my channel and share it with anyone that you think might find it useful. I want to thank you all again for your tremendous support. Your wonderful comments and emails keep me excited to keep creating new content. And a special thanks goes out to my patrons, whose support is helping to make future composer series like this one possible. So thank you all again for your incredible support. And until next time, keep studying, keep working hard, and keep writing new music.